Reading poetry is awesome.
Writing poetry is awesomer. Stick around to find out more about how to read poetry
And how to take your poetry writing from meh to magnificent. Olive Sr. is one of the best known poets from the Caribbean. She was born in Trelawney, Jamaica in 1941. She is as well known for her poetry as she is for her fiction, and was the first writer to take the prestigious Commonwealth Writers' Prize. She's also pretty famous for her non-fiction books about Caribbean history. She's written poetry about many themes, like Caribbean identity, colonialism, women's lives, and childhood, as in Bird Shooting Season, which shows a little slice of life from rural Jamaica where she grew up. In 2020, Senior published on her social media a series of pandemic poems. It's now a book.
It takes one's breath away. A man dying during a pandemic that takes away one's breath. No ventilator, but one brave spectator recording his last breath, his need. Please, somebody.
Olive Sr. made these poems to talk about what she and all of us were going through under COVID-19. Pretty cool, right? It's almost as though poetry comes from real life. What? We stand! Once you're studying English, it's likely that you will someday have to sit an exam that includes poetry analysis. Yay! Right? Actually, don't panic. In this video, we'll look at some techniques for doing poetry analysis under the gun. The very first piece of advice is, be prepared. Well, duh. Long before you set foot in the exam room, you should know what the exam structure is like and what you're expected to do. Enter the past paper. It's pretty easy to find past papers. You can look for them online, buy them in booklets, or ask your school's English department. They will probably have some in their files. Looking at past papers gives you an idea of what the exam structure is likely to be, how many sections the paper will have, and what type of questions there are in each. There's even a chance that one of those old questions will be recycled in your exam. Don't hold your breath though. While you might not be so lucky as to get the exact same question in your exam, you will definitely benefit from knowing the way questions come. The less surprised you are in the exam, the more likely you'll be able to calmly think through the questions you are asked. Preparation is the key to success. It's a cliche, yeah, but it's also true in this case. Sorry to break it to you, but the best way to learn how to answer questions on poetry is to practice, practice, practice. Who cares about poetry terms? We can just go into the exam and wing it, right? That, young Padawan, is a trap. You're building a house. Unfortunately, you don't know what a foundation means. And so, you completely, absolutely, totally do not have one in your house. Huge mistake. Huge. If you don't know the basic concepts in building, your house will probably be pretty terrible. As weird as it seems, analyzing poetry is the same thing. There's no way you can find the motif of the poem if you don't know what the word motif means. Listen, there are basic concepts in poetry that help you figure out what the poet is doing in the poem and how he is doing it. You need to know the words irony, metaphor, allusion, and a lot of other terms that describe poetic devices and technical aspects of poetry. It's not enough to just know the words. You should try to remember what they mean and how they work. And there are some words you might never meet anywhere else but in analyzing poetry, like enjambment, onomatopoeia, and stanza. And some regular words signify something a bit different from their normal meaning when used in analyzing poetry. Words like meter, structure, and form, for example. If you never knew it before, how could you guess that meter is the pattern of stressed and unstressed songs in a line of poetry? So that's why knowing poetry terms matters. Look them up and learn them as part of your exam prep. It's important for reals. And now, back to our regular programming. Let's face it, examiners can be cruel, but mostly not. In fact, there's a chance that you will be examined on a poem you've already had to study. That is a win, as long as you actually studied and prepared the poem before you went into the exam. Otherwise, whoop! But don't be surprised if you sit down for your exam and find poems you've never set eyes on in your life. In either case, do not panic. You've got this. There's a way to tackle poetry questions that can help you understand what you're being asked and how to answer those questions. First, read the poem. Just read it, absorbing the imagery, the rhythm, and the sound of the poem. Don't bust your brains trying to understand the poem yet. If you come across words or expressions you don't know, don't stress. Just read the poem and get a sense of how it makes you feel. Next, read the questions. Again, don't try to understand the questions, just read them. If there are any technical terms in the questions, make a note of them. Then, read the poem again with the questions in mind. Sometimes reading the questions will actually trigger a deeper understanding of the poem's meaning. Try to spot any technical aspects the questions mention. By now, you hopefully have some idea what the poem is about, and you've been able to identify the technical aspects of the question. Now you're ready to tackle your questions for real. Take your time and read through each question and refer to the poem to write your answers. Remember to actually answer the question. If you're asked how the poet does something, your response should show how the poet does that thing. If you're asked where in the poem something happens, make sure your answer tells the examiner where that thing happens in the poem. Answer the question. In a perfect world, you could take all the time in the world to write your answers. Unfortunately, we do not live in that world. Exams are timed. You only have a limited period to respond, and if you don't finish your answer in time, you will lose marks. Nobody wants that. But there's a fine line between working quickly and rushing. You don't want to rush. That's how you miss things or misinterpret questions. Instead, divide your time at the start of the exam and decide how much time you will spend on each section of the paper. Since you're already familiar with the paper's structure, you can roughly guess how long each kind of question will take. Keep an eye on the time as you work. And don't forget to check your work when you're done. Good luck! Exam prep includes reading a lot of poetry. Good exam prep includes doing timed practice tests. Great exam prep includes learning poetry terms and their uses. Put them all together and you're on the way to exam success. Try it!